My name is Teresa Whitmore. I'm 67 years old, a retired nurse, a widow, and, until recently, the person who kept my family stitched together when everything else fell apart. I used to believe in second chances, in the quiet magic of forgiveness, in showing up even when you're not wanted, because sometimes love shows up first and gets invited later. But that was before the text, the kind of message that doesn't come with all caps or exclamation points. It arrives plain, short, cold, like it was written from across a room full of people who don't know your name. Hey, Mom, just a heads up. Eric's parents are coming this year. He wasn't really expecting you. It's just simpler this way. Hope you understand. I read it twice, then once more, just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. I didn't. There wasn't even a period at the end, just a dangling apology, strung together by excuses and the weight of my own silence. I was sitting in my car when I read it, outside the grocery store. A rotisserie chicken on the seat next to me, still warm. I had planned to bring it over to Candace's place, something easy for her, so she wouldn't have to cook after work. I'd even picked up that expensive cinnamon cider she liked, the kind I couldn't pronounce but bought anyway because it made her smile. But as I stared at her message, that chicken might as well have been made of stone. The warmth seeped into the leather seats, unnoticed. I didn't cry. I didn't even answer. I just sat there in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor me to something that still felt real. Then I drove. Not to her house. Not to drop off dinner. Just home. The road was quiet. The kind of quiet that sounds loud inside your chest. I passed the snowbanks piled up along Maple Street, the same ones Candace used to tumble into when she was little. I passed the church where she sang in the children's choir, and the elementary school where she once forgot her lines in the winter play and cried into my coat. All of it still there, still standing, like it remembered me, even if she didn't. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had gone dim. The porch light flickered once, then went out. Inside, the house was cold, the kind of cold that no thermostat could fix. I set the bag on the counter. The cider bottle rolled gently, then stilled. Then I made a cup of tea. My favorite mug, the chipped one with the blue rim. The one Candace made for me in 5th grade. She had painted a heart on it, slightly lopsided, with the words, "Best Mom Ever," in thick red letters. I held it with both hands and let the steam kiss my face, but the tea had already gone lukewarm. I sat in silence for a long time. No TV, no music, no words, just the weight of being unnecessary. Then I stood up, walked to the hallway closet, reached up to the top shelf where I kept the documents, a folder labeled Mortgage, Aspen Property. I opened it.
She continued. We've tried that among ourselves, and it never works out well. What we're offering is something much more valuable. Which is? Liseth prompted. Beverly picked up a small flash drive that had been sitting unnoticed beside the laptop. Knowledge, she said simply. 12,000 years of accumulated military wisdom, tactical innovation, and strategic thinking. Everything we've learned about warfare, conflict resolution, and survival. She held up the drive, which bore a simple label: World Wars. This contains detailed analyses of every major human conflict in recorded history, Beverly explained. Battle plans, strategic assessments, technological developments, and most importantly, the lessons we learned from our mistakes. The alien delegates stared at the tiny device with newfound respect. We're not offering weapons, Beverly continued. We're offering understanding, the kind of tactical knowledge that took us millennia to develop and cost us hundreds of millions of lives to acquire. Ambassador Liseth studied the human carefully. And what would Earth want in return for such knowledge? Beverly's smile became genuine for the first time during the entire presentation. Peace, she said simply. A seat at the galactic table, the chance to contribute something other than violence to interstellar civilization. She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. You see, we humans have learned something that most species discover too late, she continued. War is easy. Any species can master destruction given enough time and motivation. But building something lasting, something worth preserving, that requires a completely different kind of creativity. The pavilion had grown completely silent except for the distant hum of the orbital platform's systems. So, Beverly concluded, holding up the flash drive one final time, who wants to learn how to win wars by never fighting them? They asked. Her what Earth's strongest weapon was, she handed over a flash drive labeled World Wars Story, Part 2. The silence stretched across the pavilion like a taut wire ready to snap. 47 different species military representatives stood frozen, processing the implications of what the small human female had just offered. Ambassador Lysith stepped closer to the modest display table, her elongated fingers hovering inches from the innocuous flash drive. Dr. Tate, she said carefully, you're suggesting that Earth's greatest military asset is information. Beverly nodded enthusiastically, apparently oblivious to the tension radiating from the assembled delegates. Information is the only weapon that gets stronger when you share it. Unlike antimatter bombs or plasma cannons, strategic knowledge multiplies in value when distributed properly. General Brutex's armor plates rattled with agitation. This is preposterous. Knowledge without the power to enforce it is worthless philosophy. Is it? Beverly asked innocently. She opened her
office line. I let it ring out. I sat on the porch with a shawl around my shoulders and a steaming cup of Earl Grey. The neighborhood kids were building a snowman across the street. Their laughter carried on the wind, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself enjoy a moment that didn't belong to anyone else. My phone buzzed again. 99. The screen was full. I picked it up, not to call back, but to turn it off. There was power in that silence. Not anger, not spite, just peace. I had been screaming for years, but only on the inside. Now I was whispering, and somehow they were finally listening. 99 missed calls. Not because they missed me, but because, for the first time, they couldn't reach the woman they thought would always answer. And that absence? It said more than 1,000 voicemails ever could. I remember the first time Candace asked me not to bring the sweet potato casserole. It was 4 Christmases ago. She had just moved into the Aspen house, the one with the open kitchen and marble countertops I'd paid for, but had never dared cook in. I showed up holding the glass baking dish the way I always did. Both hands. Oven mitts, still on. Oh, Mom. About the casserole. Eric's mom brought something similar, Candace said gently, reaching for it without looking at me. Maybe we can keep this in the garage fridge for later? Later never came, and neither did my casserole. The next year, she asked me not to wear my wool cardigan to dinner, the one Robert bought me on our anniversary trip to Vancouver. It just doesn't match the aesthetic, she'd said. Aesthetic. Like family gatherings were curated for a magazine spread. I stood in front of the mirror that year, holding the cardigan, unsure why it suddenly looked old, unfit, unwanted. I wore a beige shawl instead. The photos looked fine. I didn't. Then came the Christmas, when she asked if I could refrain from sharing stories about the ER, just for this year. It's just, not everyone's comfortable hearing about blood or patients while eating, Mom. Eric's family prefers lighter topics. Travel, books, culture. I bit my tongue. Hard. Because I had been a nurse for 32 years, held hands of dying strangers, delivered babies in snowstorms, watched fathers weep and mothers break. And now, My stories were too heavy for their dinner table, so I nodded and passed the cranberry sauce in silence. It's a strange thing to sit in a room full of people who carry your DNA and feel like the most foreign object there. Candace's world had changed, and in it I had become background noise, soft enough not to disturb, but never loud enough to center. Even my name changed. They called me Tess now, shorter, lighter, easier to pronounce according to Eric. Teresa sounds old-fashioned and long. Tess fits you better. Fits me better. Like I was a sweater they could tailor. One night, I watched as Eric.
Stories end with justice, some with closure. But this one was still burning. Near the edge of the truckway station, cell reception faded in and out, but her DOJ contact picked up on the second ring. Dana didn't waste time. "They burned my unit," she said flatly. "I'm compromised." "Understood," came the calm voice on the other end. "We've been expecting pushback." "I need tactical authorization," Dana continued. "Brewer's people aren't even pretending to cover their tracks anymore." There was a pause. Then, "You'll get one team. 4 agents, 2 vehicles. No press, no paper trail. You get one chance to make this stick. That's all I need." The call ended without pleasantries. Dana stared out over the desert, the horizon barely glowing with the last of the light. Then she picked up the motel landline and dialed again. "Sanders," came a tired voice on the other end, groggy like he hadn't slept in days. "You told me they used off-grid meeting spots. You remember where?" There was a long silence, not hesitation, calculation. "Staging shack, old utility outpost. Mile marker 218, just past Red Cut Wash. It's been abandoned since '96. Brewer liked places with dirt floors, easier to clean." "You sure?" "I'm sure." Dana jotted the coordinates. She didn't move for a full minute, just stared at them. There was no walking this back. The old staging shack at marker 218 hadn't seen use in years. Once a supply depot for water and first aid kits, it was now nothing but a rusted husk wrapped in sand, mesquite, and silence. No cameras, no lights, no reception. Perfect for people who didn't want to be seen. Dana arrived first with Deputy U.S. Marshal Rob Tieran, tall, lean, mid-40s, quiet. 2 additional agents joined them from DOJ's tactical unit, Agent Wolf and Agent Monroe. Experienced, precise. They set a wide perimeter, used analog earpieces, and mapped approach routes from all sides. No room for error, no trust in digital signals. Inside her SUV, Dana gripped the burner phone Sanders had used to bait Brewer. The message was simple. Old papers need moving before the audit. Usual place. No delays. Brewer replied within 20 minutes. "Relay 218 it is. 1 extra joining. Keep it clean." Dana checked the clock. 21:44. "ETA 10, Tieran muttered, checking his sidearm. He nodded toward the tripod-mounted field scope. "Lights, west end." Everyone went quiet. At 21:54, a dust-covered SUV pulled into view, just shy of the shack's shadow line. A late-model Chevy Tahoe. Superintendent Len Brewer stepped out, wearing tan slacks, a black windbreaker, and a low-pulled cap. He scanned the area slowly, cautious, then made his way toward the shack. 2 minutes later, another vehicle rolled in, older, unmarked, coated in desert grime. The plates were obscured. From it stepped a man in jeans and a lightweight jacket, a military-style duffel bag slung.
Warmth when we brought him back. I remembered the day I held the hand of a woman dying alone. No family, no friends, just me, whispering, "You're not alone," until her eyes closed for the last time. 32 years in trauma and emergency care. Blood on my scrubs. Grief under my fingernails. Dignity in every exhausted breath. And now, reduced to clerical work. I didn't correct her. not because it was true, but because the lie was easier for everyone else. In that moment, I realized something. My silence was no longer a gift. It had become a permission slip for erasure. I drove home that night with the window cracked just slightly, letting December air sting my face. I wanted to feel something sharp, something real. Because inside, everything had gone numb. When I got home, I placed the crystal glass back in its box and tucked it into the cabinet. Far behind the mugs. Behind the chipped one she made in 5th grade. The one that still read, "Best Mom Ever," even though the B had faded. I ran my fingers across that chipped edge. So much can fade when no one looks closely. The next morning, I reread her wedding speech. I had it saved in a drawer. She'd printed it for me on ivory cardstock. To the strongest woman I know, who taught me grace under pressure, dignity in service, and courage without needing applause. I stared at those words, then back at the woman last night, the one who didn't flinch when she shaved off my years of service for the sake of social convenience. How quickly they rewrite you when the audience changes. A week later, she sent a text. "Thanks again for coming, Mom. Everyone adored you. You were so gracious." Gracious. I used to think that word meant something kind. Now I know it just means quiet, invisible, agreeable, easy to manage. I replied, "Thank you, darling. Glad you had a good night." I didn't ask why she said what she said. I didn't bring it up. Because what could I say that wouldn't be labeled dramatic, oversensitive, unnecessary? Instead, I folded the speech back into its envelope and slid it beside the chipped mug in the drawer. I keep them there now, side by side, the words she once wrote and the words she now avoids. And every so often, when I need to remember who I am, I open that drawer, run my finger over the fading ink, and remind myself, I was never just what she says I was. I was what I chose to be. And what I chose was never small, even if today it no longer fits her narrative. I kept the folder in the back of the kitchen cabinet, behind the light bulbs and a box of expired oatmeal I never threw away. A plain manila folder, no label, no tabs, just a quiet archive of decisions I made with love and without witness. Inside, there were exactly 60 printed bank statements. 5 years, 12 months a year, $2,600 transferred like clockwork to Candace's mortgage account. I didn't look at them often, but I always knew they were there, a paper trail of my devotion, a quiet biography of giving without question. I unfolded the first one. December, 5 years ago. Right after Eric got laid off from the firm in New York, and they couldn't afford the down payment on the Aspen house. "It's temporary, Mom," Candace had said on the phone. Her voice clipped, proud, scared. "We just need a little help getting started." She never asked twice. She didn't need to. I refinanced Robert's life insurance, pushed back my dental work, gave up the small trip I'd planned with my book club to Vermont. No one knew. Not even Eleanor across the street. And when the payments began, I set them to autopay. Because I didn't want the monthly decision to remind me that I was giving more than just money. I was giving up parts of myself, steadily, quietly, for Candace. Always for Candace. I stared at the rows of numbers, every line so clean, so official, and yet none of it was ever acknowledged. Not in birthday cards, not in holiday toasts, not even when Eric posted about achieving financial independence last summer, holding a champagne glass beside the pool I paid to have heated. It was as if the money came from the air, from some invisible stream of good fortune. Not from the woman who skipped doctor's appointments so her daughter wouldn't miss a mortgage. I pulled out the statement from April, 2 years ago. That was the month I declined a home renovation loan to fix my leaking roof. The bank officer raised an eyebrow when I told him I was comfortable waiting. "Ma'am, this kind of water damage won't wait," he warned. I smiled. "It's just temporary," I replied. That phrase had become a habit, a bandage for every cut. Temporary, like being invisible, like being unnecessary, like being rewritten. I looked around my kitchen. The linoleum tile Robert laid by hand still held that small crack near the sink. The fridge hummed louder than it should have. The walls hadn't been painted in over a decade. But the house was paid off. Because I chose to keep my world small so theirs could grow. I pressed the folder shut with both hands, and then I whispered, "Enough." It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. Just honest. 5 years, $156,000. The price of love in silence. The cost of being the foundation for someone else's success story, and never being listed in the credits. I slid the folder back into the drawer, not out of shame, but because it was mine, my story, and I was done erasing the parts of it that didn't match Candace's version. From now on, when I opened that cabinet, I wanted to see it there. Not hidden, not buried, visible, accounted for. Just like me. I once said no to a new pair of shoes because Candace needed a dress for her interview. I said no to a weekend retreat with my choir group because Candace's car broke down, and I wanted her to have it fixed before the snow came. I said no to fresh paint in my living room because she had found a nanny who charged more but had a degree in child psychology. She said it was an investment in Olivia's early development. I nodded and agreed. Every single time. Not because I had to, but because it felt like the right thing to do. Isn't that what mothers do? Give until giving becomes your only language? I don't think Candace ever asked me to stop living. But she never asked me to keep living either. It started small. "Mom, you don't really need that, do you? You can wait till next spring, right? It's just stuff." She was right. It was just stuff. But I started keeping track. Not on paper, but in that place under the ribs where disappointments go when you don't let yourself cry about them. The week I turned 60, my book club flew to Santa Fe. I stayed back because Candace and Eric were paying for Olivia's violin lessons, and their budget was tight. I told them I had a cough. They never asked twice. The month I thought I'd finally get a new garden bench, the one with the wrought iron frame I'd circled in the catalog, was the same month Candace said they needed help to cover a flight for Eric's job interview in Atlanta, so I mailed them a check. She texted back a single heart emoji, no words. It's strange, the way we don't notice we're disappearing until we've nearly vanished. One little compromise at a time. Like not turning on the heat in October because you think, it's not that cold, and they might need it more. Like skipping a doctor's appointment because the copay is too high this month. Like keeping the same outdated glasses for 3 years because I only use them to read recipes. Every no I said to myself became a yes to their comfort. And yet, comfort never called back. There was one winter I caught bronchitis and didn't tell anyone. I warmed myself with a hot water bottle and watched holiday movies on my old TV while sipping soup from a chipped mug. That year, Candace sent a group text with a picture of the house, strung in lights from roof to lawn. She captioned it, "Christmas is all about love." I stared at the photo for 10 minutes before closing the phone. The irony felt cruel, but no one else seemed to notice. I once tried to mention I was feeling tired, that maybe I needed a little break. She responded with, "You always seem tired, Mom. Maybe it's time to stop thinking so much." I didn't respond, because the truth was too messy to say out loud. I wasn't tired from age. I was tired from disappearing. I keep a list now, not on paper, but in memory. The black cardigan I never bought. The dinner at that lakeside bistro I canceled last minute. The local pottery class I always wanted to take but never signed up for. All the ways I said, maybe next time. Until next time never came. But here's the thing. Something shifted the moment I pulled that mortgage wire. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was clean, like fresh air after a storm. I looked around my living room that night and whispered to the empty space, "From now on, I won't say no to myself first." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was a promise. And this time, it wasn't for anyone else but me. It was around 11:12 a.m. when the phone rang. I was trimming the rosemary out back. Most people don't know this, but rosemary can drown out grief. Its smell carries memories, quiet, old ones, that don't demand anything from you. I dried my hands on the kitchen towel, picked up the phone, and said nothing at first. "Mom, something wrong with the bank? The mortgage didn't go through this month." It was Candace. Her voice was clipped, irritated, but trying to stay calm in that way she always does when she's trying to sound collected. I sat down at the table. Same wooden table where I had once laid out spelling books and hot cocoa. Now, just my tea mug, the one with the faded snowflake I used every December. Alone. "I know," I replied. "You know?" I stopped. 3 words. That was it. Dead air followed, and for a moment, I imagined her standing in their big kitchen with the granite island and the imported lighting fixtures. Maybe she dropped something. Maybe it was her composure. "You what?" "I stopped sending the money." "Why, Mom, why would you do that without talking to us?" I looked out to the window. The rosemary was swaying gently. I thought of all the things I had not said in the past 5 years. "You didn't ask before excluding me from Christmas either." Her voice cracked like porcelain. "That's not the same. This is money, real-life consequences." "So was that text message, Candace?" There was a pause, long enough for both of us to hear it. Then she snapped, "Mom, do you have any idea what you've done? Eric is going to freak. We were going to refinance and—" "Then maybe don't tell him just yet." Silence. Then, "Are you serious right now?" "I'm serious every time I write a check," I said calmly. "And every time I don't." There was a shift, not in volume, not in tone, but in balance. Candace suddenly realized I was not panicking. I wasn't trying to fix anything, and that terrified her. "This is not how families work," she said, voice thinner now. "You can't just pull support without warning." I didn't pull anything. I let go. She sounded smaller when she asked, "But why now?" "Because this Christmas," I said, "you told me I wasn't expected." And for the first time, I believed you. I could hear her breath catch. I imagined her looking at the same faded snowflake mug in her mind. "You don't get to use money to punish us." "I'm not punishing you, Candace. I'm just stopping." More silence. I let it stretch. Then, "What about the house, Mom? What about the agreement?" "What agreement?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The one where you helped us. You said you would." "I said I did. And I did, Candace. For years. Without contracts. Without expectations. And now I've chosen not to. She said nothing. I took a sip of my cold tea. It was bitter, but honest. Candace, I sent you money for 5 years, while skipping doctor visits, while fixing the heater with duct tape, while saying no to every small joy in my own life. I swallowed hard, then added, this time, I simply said yes to myself. I heard her whisper something to someone, probably Eric. Mom, do you understand what this does to our timeline? I do, I said gently. It gives me one. I didn't hang up in anger. I simply set the phone down and let the line go silent. Outside, the rosemary swayed again. Inside, the snowflake mug sat empty, but still warm. And for the first time in a long, long time, so was I. She just ended the call. I heard Candace's voice echo faintly from the phone before I set it down. I didn't pick it back up. I stood there for a few moments, staring at the empty mug in my hand, tracing the faded snowflake with my thumb. It used to mean holiday cheer. Now it meant silence and peace. When she was in high school, Candace once told me, "Simple is best, Mom. Keep it simple. No drama." She said it when I cried quietly in the car after one of her friends called me too plain to be at her sweet 16. I didn't cry because of what the girl said. I cried because Candace didn't defend me. But that night, she climbed into the front seat, rolled her eyes, and said, "Simple is best, Mom. Don't overthink. Just blend in." Back then, I thought that's what love looked like, that blending in meant belonging. So I blended. I simplified myself into silence, into yeses, into blank checks and empty seats. And over the years, I became very, very simple. When she asked me to call her in-laws, Mom and Dad, in public, I said sure. When she asked me not to bring up my job as a retired nurse because Eric's family thought it was a bit blue-collar, I nodded. When she gently hinted that maybe it's better I didn't come to that gala, that vacation, that ultrasound, I smiled and said I understood. I always understood. But this Christmas, I think I finally understood too well. When she texted, "He wasn't expecting you," it landed sharper than she knew, because the truth was, she wasn't expecting me either. Not as I am. Not unless I came with money, silence, or apologies I didn't owe. So yes, I stopped the payments. Yes, I closed the account. And yes, I walked away. Because after all those years, I remembered her words. Simple is best, and it finally clicked. Simple is when a mother steps away from where she's no longer invited to stay. That day, I didn't cry. Not when she called back. Not when she left messages. Not when Eric texted something about contracts and consequences. I just watered my garden, listened to the wind through the rosemary. I sat on my back porch, blanket around my knees, and whispered to myself, "Simple is best," and smiled for the first time in a very long time. The kind of smile no one else needs to see to feel real. Not a victory, not revenge, not a performance. Just a quiet reclaiming of self. Candace had always thought strength meant sharp words and fast comebacks. But what she didn't understand was that real strength, quiet strength, is choosing not to return to a place where you are being slowly erased. She'll say, "I gave up on her." She'll tell her friends, "I withdrew support suddenly." But the truth is, I didn't withdraw anything. I simply stopped erasing myself to keep someone else comfortable. And if she ever asks again why I did it, I'll tell her, because simple is best, sweetheart. And simple was when I stepped away. I refilled my mug, this time with chamomile and honey. No snowflake needed. The mug still warmed my hands, and this time, so did my own permission to finally choose me. The doorbell rang at 8:16 a.m. I was already dressed, hair pinned, sweater neatly buttoned. Not because I was expecting company, but because I was expecting clarity. I opened the door and there they stood. Candace, arms folded, chin tilted. Eric, 2 steps behind her, face stiff like someone walking into a negotiation. "Mom," Candace began. No hug, no smile. "We need to talk." They walked in like they owned the floor beneath their shoes. But this wasn't their floor. This was my home. And for once, I let the silence speak first. They sat across from me at the dining table, the same table where I used to cut the crust off her peanut butter sandwiches, the same table where I once taught her how to spell dignity. She must have forgotten. "We noticed the house transfer didn't go through," Eric said finally, carefully. "The bank said you pulled back the funds." I nodded once. "Yes." A beat. Eric leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Was there a reason?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I stood up, walked slowly to the credenza drawer by the window, pulled out a simple brown folder. Worn edges, corners soft like it had been handled often. It had. I placed it gently in front of them and sat back down. Neither of them reached for it. So I opened it myself and spoke clearly, each syllable chosen like a stitch on a wound I'd already learned to live with. "Here are all the bank transfers," I said. $2,600 every month for 5 years, totaling $156,000. I turned a page. "Here's the down payment on your old car, Candace. The one I bought when you were 6 months pregnant and scared." Another page. "The private school tuition for Braden, the emergency dental for Ava, the plane tickets, the renovation deposit, the new fridge, the property tax I covered last fall." One by one, I laid them down. Not to accuse, but to account, to record what was never once written in thank you cards, only expected like rain in spring. Candace looked away. Her jaw locked. Eric finally spoke, voice quieter now. We didn't know it was this much. I gave the smallest smile. "Number you didn't ask." There was a time I would have felt ashamed pulling out those papers, as if I were asking for something in return. But I wasn't. I was simply drawing a line. "You told me he wasn't expecting me for Christmas," I said, eyes on Candace. "And I believed you, because deep down, you weren't either." Candace opened her mouth, then closed it. I didn't need her to respond. "I'm not angry," I said, standing up, "but I am finished." Candace finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't red. Not yet, just wide. "You're seriously cutting us off?" I folded the folder closed, slid it back toward me. "I'm seriously remembering I'm your mother, not your mortgage." And with that, I walked back toward the credenza. Not to slam a door, but to choose a window. One that looked out into the morning light where my peace waited, quiet, whole, and long overdue. Eric didn't like being cornered. You could see it in the way his eyes narrowed when I said, "I'm not your mortgage." It bruised his pride. Men like him mistake silence for weakness, until the silence walks out of the room with the checkbook. He stayed seated, but his voice hardened. "So what? You're just pulling the plug? After everything we've planned? You agreed, Teresa." I tilted my head. I agreed to help. I didn't agree to be invisible. He leaned forward, the edge of his voice pushing against civility. "You do realize that house deal was time-sensitive. If the payment doesn't go through, we lose escrow." Candace was quiet, still frozen. I wondered if she was listening to him or calculating how many months they had until the bills piled up. Eric kept going. "And frankly, We've made decisions based on your promises. I don't think it's fair. I stopped him, not with a hand, not with a shout, but with a sentence I had rehearsed for months and never thought I'd use. The title is still in my name. Silence. Sharp, immediate, like glass cracking under weight. He blinked. What? I repeated it, slower. The beach house. The one you're halfway furnishing. It's still under my name. I never finalized the quitclaim deed. I took a sip of my now cold tea. Let the weight of that truth settle between us. Because sometimes you don't need to raise your voice. You just need to raise the facts. I don't understand, Eric said, visibly thrown off. But Candace said I was going to. I nodded. But then I received a message that said, he wasn't expecting me for Christmas. I looked at my daughter when I said it. Her gaze dropped to the table. Eric's voice dropped to a growl. Are you blackmailing us? No, I replied gently. I'm protecting my boundaries. You're welcome to continue your lives, just not with what was mine, handed over under false love. I walked to the file drawer again. This time, I pulled out a second envelope. Thin, white, containing just one page. I placed it in front of him. He didn't touch it. It's the draft quitclaim I never signed. You can keep it, or tear it up. I don't mind. Either way. Eric exhaled, now visibly uncomfortable. I didn't realize we were being monitored like tenants. I almost smiled. You weren't monitored. You were trusted. There's a difference. I looked at my daughter again. You called me simple, Candace. But simple people read contracts. Simple people keep receipts. Simple people remember things that others conveniently forget. She finally spoke. I didn't mean it that way, Mom. It was a joke. I know, I said, gently cutting her off. That's what made it hurt more. I stood, not in anger, not to tower over them, but to reclaim space. You'll figure something out. You always do. You're both intelligent people. But this time, you'll do it on your own. I picked up the teacup, still cold. And if that house means something to you, you'll find a way to earn it, just like I earned everything I ever gave you. Eric stood up next, jaw locked. You're making a mistake, Teresa. No, I said quietly. I've made enough of those already. This isn't one of them. And then I smiled, the kind of smile you give someone after you finally stopped bleeding and started breathing. They left without another word. No screaming, no final threat. Just the sound of my front door closing behind the very people I once sacrificed my future for. And for the first time in decades, it didn't echo loneliness. It echoed relief. The next morning, I trimmed the roses in the front yard. It was something I hadn't done in months, maybe years. They'd overgrown the trellis, spilling onto the path like they, too, were asking to be seen. I wore gloves, but thorns still found skin. It felt right somehow. Your garden always blooms like it knows something we don't. The voice startled me, gentle but aged. I turned. Eleanor stood on her porch, cardigan loose over a faded dress, holding a mug with both hands like it warmed more than just her fingers. I smiled. You're up early. She shrugged. Habit. Hard to sleep when the house gets too quiet. We were the same age, more or less. Widows, neighbors, for 15 years. And yet, we only ever exchanged pleasantries about trash bins and mail delivery. Until now. She stepped onto the sidewalk, slow but steady. I saw them leave yesterday, she said, not asking. Your daughter and the man with the fancy belt. Eric, I said. She nodded. He walks like he forgets who bought his shoes. That made me chuckle, a dry, involuntary sound. Eleanor sat on the bench beside the lavender bush, the one I rarely used. "I know that look, you know," she said, sipping from her mug. "What look?" "The look of someone who just realized she's been giving love to people holding a calculator." I looked down. My shears paused mid-cut. She continued without waiting for an answer. "My youngest stopped calling after I refused to co-sign her third mortgage. Said I abandoned her. Funny how the word abandon only comes up when money does." I said nothing, because I knew if I opened my mouth, I might cry. "My son," she continued, "sends flowers on Mother's Day, but always with the wrong name on the card. One time it said Elaine. That's his assistant. I didn't even correct him." I finally sat down beside her. Her mug smelled like chamomile and something else. Bitterness steeped too long. "I used to think silence meant grace," Eleanor said, "that if I didn't complain, they'd notice. If I stayed useful, I'd stay loved." She turned to me, eyes rimmed with red but clear. "But now I know. Silence only teaches people where to step without guilt." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't broken. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of pouring from a cup no one refilled. Tired of waiting at doors no one opened. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just talking to Eleanor. I was looking at a version of myself I didn't want to become. "I canceled the mortgage transfer," I said softly. "They found out 2 days ago." Eleanor didn't flinch, didn't judge. Instead, she asked, "And how did it feel?" I exhaled through my nose. Like I could finally breathe, but also like I'd committed a crime. She reached over and tapped my knee. "That's the thing about setting boundaries," she whispered. "At first, it feels like punishment. Then you realize it's just a door finally closing after you've stood in the draft too long." We sat in silence for a while. Birds overhead, sprinklers ticking across another yard. 2 women in their late 60s, holding stories that no one ever asked for, but needed to be told. Before she left, Eleanor turned to me one last time. "Next time they come asking you to explain yourself," she said, "don't." I raised a brow. She smiled. "A mother's dignity is not a ledger." And with that, she disappeared into her house. Mug empty, voice steady, steps slow but unapologetic. And me? I trimmed the last rose, let one thorn draw a tiny bead of blood, and thought, for the first time in years, maybe that was the price of healing. Christmas Eve came with no snow, just wind, just stillness. The kind of stillness you feel in your bones before a big change. Not loud, not fast, but real. I stood at my kitchen window, holding the casserole dish like it was fragile. In a way, it was. It had been years since I'd made it from scratch. Sweet potato with marshmallow topping. Eleanor's favorite. She'd invited me that morning, casually, like we'd done this for decades. "We're both cooking, for one," she said. "Might as well make it 2. I nodded, not because I was desperate, but because it was the first invitation that didn't come with an expectation, just a welcome. Her table was small, wood scratched from time and grandkids, 2 settings, 1 candle, no centerpiece, no linen napkins, no performance. And yet, it felt like the warmest room I'd entered all year. Eleanor placed her famous pot roast in the center and handed me a plate. No cameras, no carefully staged photos, just 2 women with quiet aches, choosing not to be alone tonight. "You know what I miss?" she asked between bites. "Noise. Not the kind people make when they want something. The kind they make when they're just glad you're there." I swallowed slowly. "I used to pay for that noise," I said. I thought if I covered the mortgage, bought the vacations, showed up with gifts, they'd stay. They didn't. Eleanor looked up from her plate. I know, she said, simple as breath. I used to bribe love, too. Cooked feasts no one thanked me for. Babysat kids who called me her. Lent money that never came back. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, but sacred. A silence filled with recognition, not regret. I picked up my fork again, took another bite, then I said it, not to be brave, not to be dramatic, but because it had become true. I used to pay to be loved. Now I choose me. Eleanor didn't react big, didn't clap or gasp or quote scripture. She just lifted her glass of cider and tapped it gently to mine. To choosing yourself, she said. We sipped, and the warmth that followed wasn't from the cinnamon. Later, she showed me old photo albums. Smiling boys now estranged. Grandkids she hadn't seen since last summer. We didn't cry. We simply honored what was, and what could have been. That was enough. Before I left, she packed me leftovers. Christmas isn't about who you lose, she said at the door. It's about who still knocks. I hugged her, not out of pity, not from habit, but from recognition. We were mothers. We were women. We were still here. When I got home, the house was dark, but didn't feel empty. I poured a cup of tea, sat near the tree I decorated alone, and for once, I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt home. There was no grand closure, no apology texts, no sudden reconciliation, just a quiet, powerful realization. I am not hard to love. I was just offering that love to people who hadn't learned how to receive it without a receipt attached. And this Christmas, I sat at a table set with nothing but kindness. And for the first time in decades, that was enough. The message came in at 7:14 p.m. Not a call, not an apology, just a short, breathless voice note. Mom, I know you're upset. Please, Eric's in trouble. We need the loan to go through. Please don't freeze the account again. Please. She didn't say, Merry Christmas. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't say she missed me. I sat on the porch, wrapped in my old cardigan, hands curled around the chipped blue teacup Eleanor had gifted me last winter. The steam had faded, but I liked the weight of the cup in my hands. It grounded me. Behind me, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to resent, until I realized peace can feel like emptiness when you're not ready for it. Now, I was ready. I played the message again, and again. Each time I listened not just to the words, but to the silence between them. No accountability, no ownership, just desperation dressed as daughterly concern. Once upon a time, I would have driven through snow and fire. I would have written a check, pawned my rings, skipped meals, just to fix things. But now I was no longer trying to audition for the role of worthy mother. I looked at my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. What does it mean to love a child who only remembers you when things fall apart? What does it say about me if I keep answering calls from someone who never truly hears me? Is love the same as sacrifice? Or is that just something we're taught, to keep us useful long after we're valued? I took a sip. Cold now, but bitter in the best way. A memory flickered. Candace, 5 years old, bringing me a handmade card on Mother's Day. Thank you for the roof, it said. I cried so hard that night. Not because of the gesture, but because even back then she was already measuring love in brick and mortgage. I sighed. Would not replying make me cruel? Would replying make me complicit? What does forgiveness look like when the wound is still open and the one who made it still pretends they never held the knife? I closed my eyes. I imagined Eleanor across the fence, probably cleaning up dinner. I imagined other mothers, alone in apartments, hands trembling over phones, debating if silence is power or punishment. And then I asked myself something I'd never dared ask before. Do I owe her another piece of me, simply because she came from me? The wind picked up. A dry leaf scraped across the porch floor. I looked at my phone one last time. Then, without anger, without ceremony, I pressed archive. Not delete, just set aside. I stood, went inside, left the cup on the porch rail, letting the wind cool what was already cold. No final words, no dramatic gesture, just stillness. I chose, in that moment, not to retaliate, but not to rescue either. Because sometimes being a mother means standing still and letting your child face the weight of their own choices. And sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. It just means you stop bleeding for people who never noticed they cut you in the first place. I didn't respond to the message, not out of spite, not out of anger, but because it no longer deserved an answer. I'd already responded for 38 years. In silence, in bank wires, in holiday invitations that were ignored. That was enough. That night, I made myself a plate of Eleanor's leftover roast and lit a candle. Just one. For peace. Not for anyone else, just for me. The living room was quiet, except for the slow tick of the wall clock. No TV, no notifications, just me, and the soft click of time moving forward. I thought back to something Candace once said when she was 19, home from college for the summer. "Mom, you're so simple. You never ask for anything." At the time, I took it as a compliment. Now I knew it was a strategy. The simpler I was, the easier I was to shape, to extract from, to shelve. I looked down at my hands, a few small scars from years in the nursing home kitchen, a callus near my ring finger where my wedding band used to rest, hands that had held sick bodies, angry toddlers, overdue bills, and birthday cakes, hands that had done everything for everyone else, except for me. And still, they were steady now, no trembling, no craving, just calm. I picked up the family photo from the mantle, the one taken 10 Christmases ago. Candace, Eric, the grandkids, all smiles. I was in the back, cropped halfway. It used to hurt. Now it just didn't. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the fire. Sometimes it means walking out and closing the door, not with rage, but with reverence, for your own survival. I didn't block her, didn't make a social media post, didn't tell Eleanor or the neighbors, because my peace wasn't a weapon. It was a decision. I wrote one sentence in my journal that night. I forgive her, but I'm not funding her anymore. And that is love, too. The next morning, I went to the porch, retrieved my old teacup, washed it gently, and placed it on the kitchen shelf, next to a note I taped up for myself. "You are not here to be drained. You are here to bloom." I didn't cry, didn't smile either. I just returned to myself, fully, quietly, completely. And that day, I began planning a trip, not to visit Candace, not to fix anything, but to go see the Grand Canyon, something I'd always wanted to do. Because maybe forgiveness isn't just about releasing others. Maybe it's also about reclaiming the pieces of yourself you gave away too cheaply. So no, I didn't call her back. I didn't cave. I didn't offer comfort where there had never been care. But I did forgive her by finally choosing me. At 9:12 a.m. on the second Tuesday after Christmas, I dialed the number I'd saved but never used. Suncrest Mortgage Solutions. How may I help you? My name is Teresa Whitmore. I'd like to transfer the title of a property, full ownership, to my daughter. There was a pause, a flicker of confusion. Then the woman on the other end said, "Certainly. We'll need to verify your identity and walk you through the deed process." I answered every question calmly. Account numbers, dates, notarized signatures. The process took 34 minutes. At the end, she asked, "Do you want to notify the new owner now?" "No," I said. "She'll figure it out eventually." I hung up, then made tea. Earl Grey this time. No shaking hands, no triumphant music. Just silence, and a soft current running under my ribs. Some people think power is in possession, but I've learned that sometimes the ultimate power is letting go. Let her have the house. Let her taste what it's like to own something, without the mother who made it happen always waiting in the background to fix, to pay, to absorb the storms. Let the electric bills come in. Let the pipes freeze if she forgets the schedule. Let her open the mailbox and not see my name anymore. Because that house, it was never about shelter. It was a symbol of guilt, of leverage, of debt disguised as gratitude. And now it's hers, fully, legally, emotionally. I didn't sign away the house because I forgave her. I signed it away because I forgave myself. For the years I believed that love had to come with conditions, that motherhood was synonymous with martyrdom. I placed the documents in a simple white envelope, slid them into a drawer I no longer opened often. No note, no explanation. Because this wasn't a performance. It was a quiet ceremony, a passing of weight, a shift in gravity. I looked around my little rental cottage, sunlight on the kitchen tiles, the faint smell of lemon polish and cinnamon. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. No mortgage, no manipulation, just four walls and a roof that didn't echo someone else's expectations. I sat down, took one last glance at the online confirmation screen. Transfer complete, property title updated, Candace E. Flores. I smiled, not bitterly, not proudly, just clearly. Some people hold on to prove a point, others release, to reclaim themselves. I was finally the second kind. I took a sip of tea, still hot, still strong, like me. Eleanor didn't knock when she came in. She never did. Just opened the door a little, peeked in with that half smile of hers, and said, "I made too much soup again. Hope you're hungry." I nodded, already reaching for 2 bowls. We set the table together in silence. Not the heavy kind, but the kind of silence that feels like a shared song. The soup was hot, hearty. Lentils, carrots, rosemary. Simple, kind flavors. And then came her granddaughter, Mia, 7 years old, carrying a drawing. "Miss Teresa, I made you this. It's you and Grandma and our house in the stars." I took it with both hands. It was crooked. It was beautiful. And it made something inside me soften in a place I thought had turned to ash. That night, we ate slow. Not because of age, but because there was no rush. No phone buzzing. No awkward tension. No waiting for the wrong person to say the right thing. After dinner, Eleanor brought out a small candle. Not for a celebration, just because it made the room warmer. We sat by it, sipping peppermint tea. Mia curled beside her grandmother with a storybook. Eleanor turned to me gently. "You look lighter tonight." And I heard myself say, without thinking, I didn't lose my daughter. I just remembered my worth. She didn't say anything, just nodded. The kind of nod you give when a soul-level truth has just been spoken aloud for the first time. Outside, the cold pressed against the windows. Inside, I felt warm. Not the kind of warmth that comes from people pleasing, but the kind that grows from coming home to yourself. I thought of Candace, of her silence, of the house now fully hers. Maybe one day she'll understand. Maybe not. But that's no longer the point. The point is, I can sit at a table where I am wanted, where I am not a bank, or a burden, or a shadow in someone else's narrative. Just me. Teresa Whitmore, .67. Former nurse. Wife of the kindest man I've ever known. Mother of a daughter I'll always love, but no longer chase. That night, I laughed. Not the polite kind, not the forced kind. The kind that surprised even me. It cracked something open, not in pain, but in release. I caught my reflection in the window, and for the first time in a long time, I liked the woman looking back. Not because she was perfect, but because she was finally hers. I reached for the drawing Mia had given me and pinned it to the fridge, right over the spot where Candace's last Christmas card used to hang. I whispered, almost to myself, This is enough. Then I blew out the candle and went to bed with a full belly, a soft heart, and a future that, for once, was mine to write.